The coffee cup slipped from Elena Vasquez's weathered hands, shattering against the diner's checkered linoleum floor. But her eyes weren't on the spreading brown puddle or the ceramic shards. They were locked on the television mounted in the corner of Murphy's Diner, where breaking news footage showed smoke rising from Riverside Air National Guard Base, just 30 miles from her small Nevada town of Cedar Falls. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Terrorist attack, the news anchor announced gravely. Multiple casualties reported. The base's A-10 Thunderbolt squadron has been completely destroyed on the ground. Sources confirm that a coordinated strike has eliminated the region's primary close air support capabilities during a critical time when ground forces are engaged in operations overseas. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She knew those aircraft. She knew what their loss meant. More importantly, she knew exactly how much danger American troops would face without those flying tanks providing cover from above. The diner's usual morning chatter had died to whispers as other patrons absorbed the gravity of the situation. But Elena wasn't listening to their shocked murmurs. In her mind, she was calculating payload capacities, fuel consumption rates, and tactical response times. Skills that a small-town waitress had no business knowing. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the pre-dawn silence at 4:30 sharp, same as it had every morning for the past 9 years. Elena Vasquez rolled out of her narrow bed in the cramped apartment above Murphy's Diner, her feet finding the cold hardwood floor with practiced precision. Another day in Cedar Falls, Nevada. Another day of invisible service that kept the small desert town's heart beating. She dressed in the same white uniform shirt and black slacks, pinned her graying brown hair into the same tight bun, and grabbed her thermos of black coffee. The walk downstairs to the diner took exactly 43 seconds, a timing she'd perfected through countless repetitions. Finding comfort in predictability had become her survival mechanism. Murphy's Diner was a faded chrome and neon relic from the 1950s. The kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee and pie, where locals gathered to discuss weather and gossip, and where travelers paused to fuel up before crossing the empty stretches of Highway 95. The red vinyl booths were cracked with age, the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, and the atmosphere carried the weight of 1,000 conversations between people who'd never see each other again. Elena's section covered the back corner of the diner, deliberately chosen for its distance from the main flow of foot traffic. No windows facing the street, no central tables where she might draw attention. Just a cluster of booths and a counter. Section where she could serve customers efficiently while remaining largely unnoticed. She preferred it that way. The less attention, the better. "Morning, Elena," called Sam Murphy from behind the grill. Sam was 58, had inherited the diner from his father, and possessed the rare gift of knowing when to talk and when to leave people alone. He'd been trying to crack Elena's professional shell for years with limited success, but he'd learned to respect her boundaries. "Good morning, Sam," Elena replied politely, tying her apron and checking the coffee station. She powered up the register and reviewed the day's specials, though she could recite the menu from memory. The work was methodical, requiring attention to detail but little creativity. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. Elena had mastered the art of being competent but unremarkable. Efficient enough to earn decent tips and avoid complaints. Invisible enough to be forgotten by most customers within minutes of their departure. She knew the regulars' orders by heart, anticipated their needs before they voiced them, and provided service with a professionalism that seemed almost military in its precision. Around 6 o'clock, the morning rush began. Truckers grabbed coffee and Danish before hitting the road. Local ranchers stopped for breakfast after early morning chores. Highway patrol officers picked up sandwiches and energy drinks. Elena moved between tables with fluid efficiency, pouring coffee, taking orders and delivering food with minimal conversation. But as she worked, her attention kept drifting to the small television mounted behind the counter. CNN was providing continuous coverage of the attack on Riverside Air National Guard Base, images of destroyed hangars, burning aircraft, and emergency responders filled the screen. Her trained eye immediately assessed the damage while her civilian facade maintained perfect composure. "Terrible thing," muttered Frank Collins, a regular customer who ran the local hardware store. He was seated at the counter, gesturing toward the television with his coffee cup. Those A-10s were the only close air support for 3 states. Now, what happens when our boys overseas need cover? Elena's hand tightened on the coffee pot she was holding. Frank was more right than he knew. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog, was specifically designed for close air support missions. Its ability to fly low and slow, absorb tremendous damage, and deliver precise firepower made it irreplaceable in protecting ground troops. Without those aircraft, soldiers in combat zones would be significantly more vulnerable. "I'm sure they have backup plans," Elena said evenly, refilling Frank's cup. But even as she spoke, she knew the reality was more complicated. A-10 squadrons were specialized units. You couldn't just replace them with F-16s or F-18s and expect the same results. Different aircraft, different tactics, different training. Requirements. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Elena glanced at it discreetly and felt her stomach drop. The message was from Colonel David Richardson, her former commanding officer. She hadn't heard from him in almost a decade. "Elena, we need to talk. It's about Riverside. Critical situation developing. Can you meet me at the truck stop outside town at 1400 hours?" She stared at the message for a long moment, her mind racing. Richardson wouldn't contact her unless the situation was truly desperate. The colonel was one of the few people who knew her real background, and he'd respected her decision to disappear after everything that had happened 9 years ago. For him to reach out now meant that whatever was happening at Riverside had implications far beyond a simple terrorist attack. "You okay, honey?" asked Martha, the afternoon shift waitress who just arrived for her shift. Martha was 26, energetic, and possessed an unfortunate tendency to treat everyone like family. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Elena quickly deleted the message and slipped her phone back into her apron pocket. "Just tired," she replied. "Long morning rush." But Martha's observant eyes had caught something. Elena had worked alongside her for 3 years, and while Elena was always professional, she was rarely visibly shaken. "Are you sure? You seem upset about something. Is it the news about the airbase? I know some folks around here have family in the military." The comment hit closer to home than Martha could have realized. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena did have family in the military, or at least she had once, before she'd become the quiet waitress who served coffee and pie to truck drivers. Before she'd buried her past so deep that most days she almost believed it herself. "I'm fine," Elena said firmly. "Just need some fresh air." She stepped outside behind the diner, breathing in the dry desert air that carried the scent of sage and distant mountains. Cedar Falls was the kind of place where you could see for miles in every direction, where the sky stretched endlessly overhead, and where the silence was broken only by the occasional truck rumbling past on the highway. For just a moment, muscle memory stirred, the feel of a stick grip under her hands, the weight of a helmet on her head, the roar of twin engines pushing 30,000 pounds of armored aircraft through hostile skies. Elena caught herself and forced the memories back. Down, that life was over. She'd made her choice 9 years ago when everything had fallen apart. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. Breaking. Pentagon confirms terrorist attack on Riverside Air National Guard Base, was coordinated assault by unknown. Foreign actors, all A-10 aircraft destroyed. Base commander requests immediate assistance from reserve and retired pilots with A-10 experience. Elena felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Richardson's message wasn't a coincidence. Someone, somewhere, was putting together a list of pilots who could handle A-10s, and despite 9 years of waitressing tables and serving coffee, her name was apparently still on that list. She went back inside to finish her shift, but concentration proved difficult. Every news update seemed to bring worse information. The terrorist attack hadn't just destroyed aircraft. It had killed several pilots and ground crew members. The base was effectively defenseless, and intelligence suggested that the attack might have been a prelude to something larger. Around noon, Elena noticed a familiar figure entering the diner. Colonel Richardson, still looking every inch the career military officer despite being in civilian clothes. He was 55 now, with gray threading through his brown hair, but he carried himself with the same confident bearing she remembered from their time together at Davis Monthan Air Force Base. He took a seat in her section, at the corner booth farthest from other customers. Elena approached with coffee and a menu, her professional waitress smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon," she said politely. "What can I get you today?" Richardson studied her face for a moment before responding, "Just coffee for now. And maybe a few minutes of your time when you get a break." Elena poured his coffee with steady hands, but she could feel other customers beginning to take notice of their interaction. A well-dressed man in expensive suit wasn't exactly common in Murphy's diner, and several of the regulars were already casting curious glances in their direction. "I'll see what I can do," she replied neutrally. 20 minutes later, during the lull between lunch and dinner rushes, Elena slipped into the booth across from Richardson. Up close, she could see the stress lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Whatever had brought him to Cedar Falls was serious. "Elena," he said quietly, "I know this is the last thing you wanted. I know you've built a life here. And I know why you left, but I need your help." She said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. "Riverside wasn't just a terrorist attack," Richardson continued. "Intelligence indicates it was a coordinated strike designed to eliminate our close air support capabilities in this region. There are indications that a larger operation is being planned, possibly targeting our forward operating bases overseas where our ground troops are engaged." Elena kept her expression neutral, but her mind was already processing the tactical implications. "I'm sure you have other pilots available." "We do, but not many with your specific expertise. The A-10 community is small, Elena, you know that. And right now, we need someone who understands the aircraft's capabilities in ways that can't be taught in a classroom." Richardson leaned forward slightly. "We're standing up an emergency response unit. Older A-10s from the boneyard, updated with modern systems. The mission would be to provide immediate close air support capability while the main force rebuilds. It's volunteer only, but the need is critical." Elena felt the weight of 9 years pressing down on her. She'd walked away from this world once before, when politics and bureaucracy had made it impossible to continue. The betrayal she'd experienced at the hands of people she'd trusted had nearly destroyed her. The quiet life she'd built in Cedar Falls was her sanctuary, her protection against a world that had proven how quickly it could turn against those who served it. "I'm not that person anymore," she said finally. "I serve coffee now. I take orders. For hamburgers and pie, that other life is over, is it?" Richardson asked gently. "Because from what I can see, you've been keeping up with tactical developments, studying aircraft specifications, maintaining situational awareness of global military operations. That doesn't sound like someone who's completely left the military behind." He was more perceptive than she'd given him credit for. Elena did follow military news, did stay current on aircraft developments and tactical innovations. She told herself it was simple professional curiosity, but the truth was more complicated. You could take the pilot out of the cockpit, but you couldn't completely remove the warrior's heart. Even if that were true, Elena said slowly, it wouldn't matter. I'm not current on systems, not qualified on modern variants, not cleared for classified operations. I'm 9 years out of date. Richardson smiled slightly. Elena, you were the best A-10 pilot I ever knew. You understood that aircraft in ways that bordered on telepathic. You could make it do things that weren't in the manual, and you could bring it home when lesser pilots would have been killed. He paused, studying her face. More importantly, you understood the mission. Close air support isn't just about flying and shooting. It's about protecting the people on the ground who depend on you. It's about being there when everything else has failed and the troops have nowhere else to turn. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She remembered that feeling, that sense of purpose that came from knowing your skills could mean the difference between soldiers coming home alive or not coming home at all. It was a responsibility that had driven her to excel, to push beyond normal limits, to become something more than just another pilot. But she also remembered the cost. The political gains, the impossible decisions, the moment when her own command had thrown her under the bus to protect their careers. The betrayal that had ended her military service and forced her into exile in places like Cedar Falls. That world destroyed me once, she said quietly. I won't let it happen again. Richardson nodded, understanding more than she'd expected. I know what happened 9 years ago, Elena. I know about the friendly fire incident, about how command handled the aftermath, about why you resigned. It was wrong, and you deserved better. He leaned back in the booth, his expression serious. But this is different. This isn't about politics or career advancement or covering up mistakes. This is about American soldiers who are going to die without close air support. This is about preventing a strategic disaster that could cost hundreds of lives. Elena felt the familiar conflict between duty and self-preservation, between the warrior she'd been and the civilian she'd become. For 9 years she'd successfully suppressed the part of herself that lived for the challenge of combat flying, the satisfaction of executing perfect missions, the knowledge that her skills made a difference in the world. How long would it take? She asked, surprising herself by considering his offer. 6 weeks of refresher training, followed by deployment as needed. Probably no more than 6 months total commitment. After that, you could come back here and return to your life. Elena looked around the diner at the familiar booths and counters, at the life she'd built serving coffee and pie to truckers and locals. It was a good life, peaceful and predictable. But as she watched the news coverage continuing on the television, she couldn't shake the image of American soldiers calling for air support that wouldn't come. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Richardson stood up, leaving money for his coffee on the table. I understand. But Elena, I need an answer by tomorrow morning. The situation is developing rapidly, and if we're going to put together an effective response, we need to start immediately. As he reached the door, he turned back to her. For what it's worth, I never stopped believing you were the best pilot I ever commanded. Cedar Falls is lucky to have you, but the country needs you more. After he left, Elena returned to her tables and finished her shift, but her mind was elsewhere. Every news update about Riverside seemed to reinforce Richardson's assessment that this was more than a simple terrorist attack. The coordination, the timing, the specific targeting of A-10 capabilities suggested a sophisticated operation with strategic objectives. That evening, alone in her apartment, Elena pulled out a locked box from under her bed. Inside were medals, commendations, and photographs from her time in the Air Force, her flight wings, her combat decorations, proof of a life she'd tried to forget. She traced the edges of her distinguished flying cross, remembering the mission that had earned it, The lives that had been saved because she'd been willing to take risks that other pilots wouldn't consider. But she also remembered the aftermath of her last mission, when political necessity had required someone to blame for an incident that had cost civilian lives. Despite following orders, despite making the best decisions possible under impossible circumstances, she'd become the scapegoat that allowed others to avoid responsibility. Elena closed the box and locked it away again. Some memories were too dangerous to revisit, some identities too painful to reclaim. She was Elena Vasquez, waitress at Murphy's Diner, and that had to be enough. But as she lay in bed listening to the distant sound of commercial aircraft passing overhead, Richardson's words echoed in her mind. American soldiers would die without close air support. The A-10 community was small, and every qualified pilot mattered. She had skills that could save lives, training that was irreplaceable, experience that had been earned through years of dedication and sacrifice. The problem was that using those skills meant stepping back into a world that had betrayed her once before. It meant risking her carefully constructed peace for the chance to serve again. It meant choosing between personal safety and professional duty, between the life she'd built and the life she'd been born to live. Elena stared at the ceiling until dawn, weighing impossible choices and trying to decide who she really was underneath 9 years of deliberate anonymity. The quiet waitress was safe, but the warrior was needed. And somewhere in the balance between those two identities lay a decision that would determine not just her future, but the fate of soldiers she'd never met but was sworn to protect. Morning was coming, and with it, Richardson's deadline for an answer. Elena Vasquez had to decide whether she was ready to become someone else again, whether the skills that had once defined her were worth the risks that came with using them. The warrior was stirring, and Cedar Falls might not be big enough to contain what emerged. Elena's alarm never sounded the next morning because she never went to sleep. She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone as dawnlight crept through the thin curtains of her apartment. Richardson's contact information glowed on the screen, waiting for her decision. Outside, Cedar Falls was waking up to another ordinary day, but Elena knew that whatever choice she made in the next few minutes would shatter the carefully constructed ordinary life she'd built. At exactly 7 o'clock, her phone rang. Richardson. Punctual as always. "Colonel," she answered, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "Elena, I hope you've had time to consider my offer." She closed her eyes, feeling 9 years of careful anonymity hanging in the balance. "I have conditions. I'm listening. Complete operational autonomy once I'm in the cockpit. No political interference, no second-guessing tactical decisions. I fly the missions as I see fit, and command backs my calls." Richardson was quiet for a moment. "That's asking a lot, Elena. Chain of command exists for good reasons. Chain of command also destroyed my career once before. If you want my expertise, you get it on my terms. Otherwise, find someone else. There is no one else." "Not with your capabilities." Richardson paused. "Agreed. You'll have tactical autonomy in the air. But Elena, you'll need to work within the system on everything else. Planning, briefings, coordination with ground forces. I can protect you from politics, but I can't let you operate in complete isolation." Elena felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. It wasn't perfect, but it was more protection than she'd had 9 years ago. "When do I need to report?" "Today, 1800 hours at Nellis Air Force Base. There's a civilian charter flight leaving Las Vegas at 1400 that will take you to the training facility. Can you make it?" She looked around her small apartment, at the life she was about to abandon. "I'll be there." "Elena," Richardson's voice carried a note of gratitude. "Thank you. I know what this costs you." After ending the call, Elena sat in the silence of her apartment and tried to process what she'd just committed to. 6 weeks of training, followed by deployment to combat zones where American soldiers were counting on close air support that might not arrive. She was trading the safety of anonymity for the responsibility of life and death decisions made at 300 miles per hour and 50 feet above the ground. Her hands were shaking slightly as she began packing. Military habits died hard, and she found herself selecting clothes and personal items with the efficiency of someone who'd packed for deployments many times before. But this time felt different. This time she was packing away Elena Vasquez, the waitress, and preparing to resurrect someone she'd tried to bury years ago. At 8 o'clock, she walked downstairs to Murphy's diner for what might be the last time as an employee. Sam was already behind the grill, prepping for the morning rush, and Martha was setting up tables. The familiar routine felt surreal now. That Elena knew she was about to leave it behind. "Sam," she called out, her voice carrying an edge that made him look up immediately. "I need to talk to you." He wiped his hands on his apron and approached the counter where she stood. "What's on your mind, Elena? You look like you've got something serious to discuss." "I'm leaving," she said simply. "Today, I won't be coming back." Sam's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Leaving? Elena, what's wrong? Did something happen? If it's about money, we can work something out. You're the best waitress I've ever had." The sincerity in his voice made Elena's decision even more difficult. Sam had been a good employer, respectful of her privacy and appreciative of her work. He deserved better than a sudden departure with no explanation. "It's not about money or the job. I've been called away on family business. Emergency situation that requires my immediate attention." It wasn't exactly a lie. The military had been her family once, and Richardson's call was certainly an emergency. But Elena could see in Sam's eyes that he sensed there was more to the story. Martha approached from across the diner, having overheard part of the conversation. "Elena, you're leaving? Just like that? What kind of family emergency requires you to disappear without notice?" The question hung in the air, and Elena realized that her carefully maintained cover story was already beginning to unravel. Martha was too observant, too curious about Elena's background. The kind of departure Elena was making would raise questions that a small-town waitress shouldn't be able to answer convincingly. "The kind that doesn't leave room for discussion," Elena replied firmly. "I'm sorry for the short notice, but some things can't be planned around work schedules." Sam studied her face for a long moment, seeing something he'd missed during their years of working together. "Elena, I don't know what's really going on here, but I want you to know that you've always got a place at Murphy's if you need it. Whatever this emergency is, whatever you're really doing, your family here." The unexpected kindness nearly broke Elena's composure. She'd spent 9 years building walls between herself and the people around her, maintaining professional distance to avoid exactly this kind of emotional attachment. But Sam's words reminded her that she had built something valuable in Cedar Falls, even if it was based on a carefully constructed lie. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." As the morning rush began, Elena worked her final shift with mechanical precision. She served coffee to truckers, took orders from ranchers, and maintained her professional demeanor while her mind was already shifting toward tactical considerations she hadn't thought about in years. Weapon systems, flight profiles, coordination with ground controllers. The muscle memory of military aviation was awakening after 9 years of dormancy. Around noon, a familiar figure entered the diner that made Elena's blood run cold. Chief Master Sergeant Linda Hayes, someone Elena recognized from her previous life at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Hayes was in civilian clothes, but her bearing and the way she scanned the room marked her as military even to casual observers. Hayes took a seat in Elena's section, at a table with clear sight lines to the entrance and back exit. Professional habits that confirmed Elena's suspicion that this wasn't a coincidental visit. "Good afternoon," Elena said, approaching with coffee and a menu. "What can I get you today?" Hayes looked up at her with knowing eyes. "Coffee's fine for now." And maybe a few minutes of conversation when you get a chance. Elena poured the coffee with steady hands, but her mind was racing. Hayes's presence meant that Richardson wasn't the only one who knew about her background. Word was spreading through military channels, and her carefully maintained anonymity was dissolving faster than she'd anticipated. During the next lull, Elena slipped into the chair across from Hayes. The older woman studied her face with the penetrating gaze of someone accustomed to reading people under pressure. "Captain Vasquez," Hayes said quietly, using Elena's former rank. "It's been a long time. It's just Elena now. I'm not military anymore." Hayes smiled slightly. "Once a pilot, always a pilot. You can change your uniform, but you can't change what's in your blood." "What do you want, Sergeant?" "I'm here because Colonel Richardson asked me to provide some context for what you're getting into. The situation is more complex than he was able to explain over the phone." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of complexity?" Hayes leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "The attack on Riverside wasn't random terrorism. Intelligence indicates it was a coordinated strike by a foreign military unit, possibly mercenaries, using stolen American aircraft. The objective was to eliminate our close air support capabilities in advance of a larger operation." "What kind of larger operation?" "We're not entirely sure, but the targeting was too precise to be coincidental. Whoever planned this knows our force structure, our deployment patterns, our vulnerabilities. They're planning something that requires the elimination of A-10 capabilities specifically." Elena processed this information with the tactical awareness that had made her an exceptional pilot. A-10s are primarily used for close air support and forward operating base defense. If someone wanted to eliminate them first, it suggests they're planning ground operations against American forces. Exactly. And that means the emergency response unit you're joining isn't just about replacing destroyed aircraft. You're going to be the primary defense against whatever comes next. The weight of responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a familiar burden. This wasn't just about flying missions and providing air support. She was being asked to stand between American ground forces and a sophisticated enemy that had already demonstrated the ability to strike at will. "How many pilots are we talking about?" Elena asked. "Including you, 4. 4 pilots to cover a response area that normally requires 3 full squadrons. The mathematics are not encouraging." Elena understood the implications immediately. 4 A-10s against an organized enemy force meant that every mission would be critical, every pilot irreplaceable. There would be no margin for error, no backup if something went wrong. "Who are the other 3? Hayes consulted a tablet she'd pulled from her bag. "Major Marcus Torres, former Marine Corps pilot with extensive combat experience. Captain Sarah Chun, Air Force Reserve with specialization in electronic warfare. And Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, recently retired from active duty with over 3,000 hours in A-10s. Elena recognized 2 of the names. Torres had a reputation as an aggressive but skilled pilot who'd served multiple deployments. In the Middle East, Mitchell was legendary in the A-10 community, known for his ability to provide close air support in impossible conditions. If Richardson had managed to recruit those 2, the situation was even more serious than Elena had realized. "What's the training timeline?" "Accelerated qualification on the A-10C variant, followed by mission-specific training for the operational environment you'll be deployed to. 6 weeks total, but realistically, you'll be flying combat missions within a month." Elena felt the familiar pre-deployment anxiety that every combat pilot knew. The mixture of anticipation and dread that came with knowing you were about to put your life on the line for objectives that extended far beyond personal survival. "There's something else," Hayes continued. "Your security clearance has been reactivated at the highest levels. Whatever happened 9 years ago, whatever caused you to leave, Command has decided that your skills outweigh any past issues. The statement hit Elena like a physical blow. Her security clearance had been revoked as part of the political fallout from the friendly fire incident that ended her career. Getting it reinstated, especially at high levels, meant that someone with significant influence had intervened on her behalf. Who authorized that? Above my pay grade. But Elena, whoever did it, put their own career on the line. Don't waste the opportunity. After Hayes left, Elena finished her shift in a daze. The conversation had confirmed her worst fears about the scope of what she was getting into, while simultaneously demonstrating that her skills were valued more highly than she'd realized. Someone in the Pentagon was betting their career on her ability to make a difference in whatever was coming. At 4 o'clock, Elena clocked out for the final time and said goodbye to Sam and Martha. The farewells were brief and awkward, with too many unasked questions hanging in the air. She promised to stay in touch, knowing it was a lie, and walked out of Murphy's Diner carrying a small bag of personal belongings and 9 years of carefully suppressed memories. The drive to Las Vegas took 3 hours through empty desert landscape that reminded Elena why she'd chosen Nevada for her exile. The vast spaces, the silence, the sense of being completely alone under an enormous sky. It was peaceful in a way that appealed to someone who'd spent years dodging political pressures and bureaucratic games. But as she drove, Elena found herself thinking about tactics again. Aircraft performance characteristics, weapons loadouts, coordination with ground controllers. The technical aspects of combat flying that had once been as natural as breathing were surfacing from years of suppression. Her hands unconsciously gripped the steering wheel in positions that mimicked flight controls. The charter flight from Las Vegas to Nellis was filled with military personnel and defense contractors, people whose conversations revealed they were involved in classified programs of various types. Elena kept to herself, but she listened to fragments of discussion about weapon systems, operational requirements, and budget allocations. The military-industrial complex was in full operation, responding to whatever crisis had prompted her recruitment. Nellis Air Force Base looked exactly as Elena remembered from her previous visits years ago. Acres of aircraft, training facilities, and support infrastructure designed to maintain American air supremacy. But now she was returning not as a regular Air Force pilot, but as a civilian contractor participating in an emergency response program that existed outside normal command structures. Colonel Richardson met her at the base operations building. Looking every inch the career officer, despite being in flight suits rather than dress uniforms. His expression mixed relief at her arrival with concern about what lay ahead. "Elena, welcome back. I know this isn't easy for you." "Nothing about. This is easy, Colonel. But I'm here, and I'm committed to the mission." Richardson led her through the base toward a series of hangars that had been converted into temporary training facilities. The other pilots arrived yesterday. Torres and Chun are already in refresher training, and Mitchell is working with the maintenance crews to understand the updated systems. As they walked, Elena could see 10 aircraft in various states of preparation. Some were clearly older models being upgraded with modern electronics and weapons systems. Others appeared to be recent production aircraft that had been diverted from other units. The sight of the familiar twin-engine, straight-wing aircraft stirred something deep in Elena's chest. "These are beautiful machines," she said quietly. Richardson followed her gaze. "Updated with the latest targeting systems, improved armor, enhanced communications. They're the most capable A-10s ever built, designed specifically for the kind of missions you'll be flying." They entered a hangar where 3 other pilots were gathered around a partially disassembled aircraft, studying the installation of new equipment. Elena recognized Torres immediately, a compact, intense man in his mid-30s with the alert bearing of someone who'd seen extensive combat. Chun was younger, perhaps late 20s, with the focused attention of a pilot who specialized in electronic systems. Mitchell was older, close to retirement age, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd mastered his profession completely. "Gentlemen, ladies," Richardson called out, "I'd like you to meet Captain Elena Vasquez, the final member of our team." Torres looked up from the aircraft and studied Elena with professional interest. "Vasquez, I've heard the name. Desert Storm veteran, right? Multiple deployments, exceptional combat record." Elena nodded acknowledgement. "Major Torres, your reputation precedes you as well." Mitchell approached with the slow, confident walk of a veteran pilot. "Elena Vasquez. Call sign Viper, if I remember correctly. You're the pilot who pulled off that impossible rescue in Afghanistan. Saved an entire infantry platoon when they were surrounded." The memory hit Elena unexpectedly. That mission had been one of her finest moments. A complex operation that required flying through intense ground fire to provide close air support for trapped soldiers. It had also been one of the last successful missions before the friendly fire incident that ended her career. "That was a long time ago," she said carefully. Chun looked up from the equipment she was examining. "Ma'am, I've studied some of your tactics and training scenarios. The way you used terrain masking and coordinated with ground controllers was textbook perfect. It's an honor to work with you." Elena felt uncomfortable with the praise, but she recognized the importance of establishing professional credibility with her new teammates. These pilots needed to trust her judgment and abilities, especially given the high-stakes nature of their mission. "Thank you. I look forward to working with all of you." Richardson gestured toward a conference room adjacent to the hangar. "Let's discuss the tactical situation and training schedule. Elena needs to be brought up to speed on what we're facing." The briefing that followed was sobering. Intelligence had confirmed that the attack on Riverside was part of a larger operation designed to eliminate American close air support capabilities across multiple theaters. Similar attacks had been attempted against bases in Europe and the Pacific, though most had been unsuccessful. The enemy, still unidentified but clearly sophisticated, was preparing for ground operations that would require the absence of A-10 support. "Our mission," Richardson explained, "is to provide emergency close air support for forward operating bases and deployed ground units until regular squadrons can be reconstituted. You'll be operating in small teams, often with minimal backup, in environments where every mission is critical." Elena studied the tactical maps and operational requirements. "What's our deployment schedule?" 2 weeks of intensive training here at Nullis, followed by forward deployment to undisclosed locations. Mission duration is estimated at 4 to 6 months, but could be extended depending on operational requirements. Torres leaned forward in his chair. "Colonel, what about rules of engagement? Are we operating under normal military protocols? Or do we have expanded authorization given the emergency nature of the situation?" "You'll have broader tactical flexibility than normal operations allow, but you're still bound by international law and military regulations. The difference is that you'll have authority to make engagement decisions without waiting for higher approval in time-critical situations." Elena understood the implications. They were being given the kind of operational autonomy that was normally reserved for special operations forces. It meant greater freedom to respond to developing situations, but also greater responsibility for the consequences of their actions. "What about aircraft availability?" Mitchell asked. 4 pilots, but how many aircraft?" Richardson's expression grew serious. "Initially 6 aircraft. 2 will be held in reserve for maintenance and emergency replacement. You'll be operating with minimal backup, so aircraft preservation is critical." Chun looked up from her notes. "Sir, what about intelligence support? Electronic warfare capabilities, threat assessment, communications with ground units? You'll have full intelligence support, but remember that you're operating in a rapidly changing environment. Threat assessments may be outdated by the time you receive them, and communication with ground units may be intermittent due to enemy jamming." Elena felt the familiar weight of combat pilot responsibility settling on her shoulders. Everything about this mission suggested that they would be operating at the edge of their capabilities, with minimal support, against an enemy that had already demonstrated sophisticated planning and execution abilities. After the briefing, the 4 pilots were shown to temporary quarters on the base. Elena's room was sparse but functional, with a single bed, desk, and small closet. It reminded her of countless similar rooms she'd occupied during her military career, places that served as temporary homes between deployments. That evening, she joined the other pilots for dinner in the base mess hall. The conversation was professional but guarded, as 4 strangers tried to assess each other's capabilities and reliability. Elena found herself studying her teammates with the critical eye of someone who would soon be trusting them with her life. Torres was clearly the most experienced combat pilot, with an aggressive flying style that had earned him both commendations and occasional reprimands for taking unnecessary risks. His stories of close air support missions in Iraq and Afghanistan revealed someone who understood the life-and-death nature of their work. Chun brought a different perspective, with expertise in electronic warfare and countermeasures that would be crucial against an enemy using sophisticated jamming and detection systems. Her technical knowledge was impressive, but Elena wondered how she would handle the psychological pressure of combat flying. Mitchell was the senior pilot in terms of experience, but his recent retirement meant he might be rusty on current tactics and procedures. However, his reputation in the A-10 community was legendary, and Elena had no doubt about his flying abilities. "So Elena," Torres said during a pause in conversation, "what have you been doing for the past 9 years? Your military record just stops abruptly after that incident in Afghanistan." Elena had been expecting this question, but it still made her uncomfortable. Civilian work, nothing that would interest military pilots. "Come on," Chun pressed gently. "You don't just disappear for 9 years without a story. Were you flying for contractors? Working as an instructor? Surely you stayed connected to aviation somehow." Elena felt the weight of 3 pairs of eyes studying her reaction. These pilots needed to trust her, but she wasn't ready to reveal the extent to which she'd abandoned her military identity. "I needed time away from flying," she said finally. "After what happened in Afghanistan, I decided that civilian life might offer some advantages over military service." Mitchell nodded slowly. "The friendly fire incident. I remember reading about it. Tough situation, impossible choices, and you got blamed for following orders that turned out to be politically inconvenient." Elena was surprised by his understanding. "Something like that. Politics," Torres said with disgust. "I've seen good pilots destroyed by bureaucrats who never left Washington." "Whatever happened, Elena, it doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're here, and we need every qualified pilot we can get." Chun raised her water glass in a mock toast. "To 4 pilots against the world. May our aircraft be reliable, our weapons accurate, and our luck better than our planning." Elena found herself smiling despite her anxiety. These were her people, fellow warriors who understood the unique pressures and responsibilities of combat. Flying, for the first time in 9 years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. But as they finished dinner and prepared for the intensive training that would begin the next morning, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something that would test her abilities and resolve in ways she hadn't experienced even during her most challenging military assignments. The warrior was awakening after 9 years of dormancy, but the battlefield she was about to enter would be unlike anything she'd faced before. The pre-dawn darkness at Nellis Air Force Base carried the crisp desert chill that Elena remembered from her military days. She stood beside her A-10 Thunderbolt II, running through the final pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision that had once been second nature. After 6 weeks of intensive retraining, muscle memory had returned with startling clarity, as if 9 years of serving coffee had been nothing more than an extended vacation from her true calling. The aircraft gleamed under the hangar lights, its gray camouflage paint scheme broken by the distinctive nose art that Torres had insisted upon. A snarling desert viper coiled around a coffee cup with Viper's Brew emblazoned beneath in bold letters. Elena had protested the coffee reference, but her teammates had overruled her objections with good-natured persistence. Ready for the real thing? Mitchell approached from his own aircraft, flight helmet tucked under his arm. At 53, he moved with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned to conserve energy for when it mattered most. Elena nodded, checking her weapons loadout one final time. 30mm cannon rounds, Maverick missiles, and a mix of bombs designed for close air support missions. Everything she needed to turn enemy positions into smoking craters while keeping friendly forces safe. As ready as anyone can be for this kind of operation. The mission briefing had been sobering. Intelligence indicated that a coordinated assault on Forward Operating Base Sentinel in an undisclosed location overseas was imminent. The base housed 300 American soldiers and served as a critical logistics hub for operations in the region. Without close air support, the defenders would be overwhelmed by superior numbers and heavy weapons. Chun jogged over from the operations building, clutching a tablet with last-minute intelligence updates. New information from satellite reconnaissance. Enemy forces are larger than initially estimated. We're looking at approximately 800 hostiles with armor support, artillery, and what appears to be surface-to-air missile systems. Torres whistled low as he joined the group. 800 against 300, and they've got SAMs. This is going to be interesting. Elena felt the familiar pre-combat mixture of anxiety and anticipation. The numbers were sobering, but A-10s had been designed for exactly this kind of mission. Flying low and slow, absorbing punishment while delivering devastating firepower to protect ground forces. It was what the aircraft did best, and what she'd trained her entire career to accomplish. Flight plan? She asked Chun, who served as their electronic warfare specialist and mission coordinator. We launch in 15 minutes, flight time approximately 4 hours to the area of operations. Weather is clear, visibility unlimited. Enemy forces are expected to begin their assault at dawn local time, which gives us a narrow window to arrive and establish air superiority. Richardson appeared from the operations building, walking quickly toward their aircraft. His expression carried the tension of someone who'd been receiving updates that weren't entirely encouraging. Final intelligence brief, he announced as the 4 pilots gathered around him. Enemy forces have been identified as a combination of foreign military units and mercenaries, equipped with stolen NATO equipment and vehicles. Their objective appears to be capturing the base intact, which suggests they're after intelligence or equipment rather than simple destruction. Elena processed this information with tactical awareness honed by years of combat experience. If they want the base intact, they'll avoid using heavy artillery or airstrikes. That means they're counting on overwhelming the defenders with ground forces. Exactly, which makes your mission critical. Without close air support, our people won't be able to hold their positions long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Mitchell studied the tactical display on Chun's tablet. What about friendly air assets in the area? Are we operating alone, or do we have backup? Richardson's expression darkened. You're it. 4 aircraft against whatever the enemy brings. To the fight. The nearest Air Force units are 12 hours away, and Navy assets are committed to other operations. The weight of responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a familiar burden. 4 pilots, 4 aircraft, and 300 soldiers counting on their ability to turn the tide of a battle against overwhelming odds. It was the kind of mission that separated exceptional pilots from merely good ones. Rules of engagement? Torres asked. Weapons free on any hostile forces threatening the base or American personnel. Coordinate with ground controllers, but use your judgment on target selection and engagement priorities. You're authorized to take whatever action is necessary to protect our people. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction at the operational autonomy they'd been granted. No political constraints, no second-guessing from higher command, no bureaucratic interference with tactical decisions. Just the mission and the freedom to accomplish it using their professional judgment. "Time to go," Richardson said, checking his watch. "Good hunting, and bring everyone home safely." The 4 pilots dispersed to their aircraft, beginning the startup sequences that would transform them from ground-based discussions into airborne weapon systems. Elena strapped herself into the familiar cockpit of her A-10, feeling the aircraft respond to her presence like a living thing. Engines spooled up with their distinctive whine. Systems came online with soft electronic chirps, and the heads-up display painted targeting information across her field of vision. "Viper flight, this is Control Tower. You are cleared for takeoff, runway 27. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited. Good luck out there." Elena pushed her throttles forward and felt 30,000 pounds of armored aircraft surge down the runway. The sensation was indescribable. After 9 years away from flying, raw power under her control, the satisfaction of human and machine working in perfect harmony, the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. "Viper flight airborne," she reported as all 4 aircraft climbed into the prey-dawn darkness. "Proceeding to area of operations, estimated time of arrival 0630 local." The flight across international airspace gave Elena time to review the tactical situation and coordinate with her teammates. Chun monitored electronic intelligence, watching for enemy communications and radar signatures. Torres and Mitchell flew loose formation, positioning themselves to respond quickly to developing threats. Elena led the flight, making navigation decisions and maintaining communication with various air traffic control centers. As they approached the operational area, the first hints of dawn appeared on the eastern horizon. Elena could see the distinctive geography of their destination below, rolling hills dotted with military installations and civilian settlements. Forward Operating Base Sentinel sat in a strategic valley, its defensive positions clearly visible. From altitude, Viper lead, this is Sentinel Control. We have visual contact with your flight. Enemy forces are approximately 10 kilometers northeast of our position and closing fast. We're taking indirect fire from mortar and rockets. Elena studied her tactical display, noting the positions of friendly and enemy forces. The attacking troops were advancing in multiple columns, using terrain features to mask their approach while maintaining coordinated movement. Professional military tactics executed by experienced soldiers. Sentinel Control, Viper lead. We have your position marked. Request permission to engage enemy forces with close air support. Permission granted, Viper lead. Danger close authorization approved for any targets threatening the base perimeter. Elena felt the familiar surge of combat adrenaline as she rolled her aircraft into an attack position. Below, she could see muzzle flashes from enemy weapons, the distinctive signatures of armored vehicles, and the movement of troops advancing toward American positions. Viper flight, this is lead. I'm going in first to mark targets and assess enemy disposition. 2 and 3, establish overwatch positions. 4, prepare for electronic countermeasures if they activate SAM systems. Elena dove toward the enemy formations, her aircraft's targeting systems automatically identifying and prioritizing threats. The A-10's cannon was designed for exactly this kind of work, capable of destroying armored vehicles and personnel. With devastating efficiency, Viper lead engaging enemy armor. Fox 2, Fox 2. She fired 2 Maverick missiles at a cluster of enemy tanks, watching the weapons streak toward their targets with precision guidance. The explosions bloomed orange and black against the morning landscape, eliminating immediate threats to the base's northern perimeter. Direct hits on enemy armor, reported Torres from his overwatch position. Lead, you've got infantry moving. to flank your position from the east. Elena banked hard right, bringing her cannon to bear on the enemy troops. The 30mm rounds stitched across their position with lethal accuracy, forcing the survivors to seek cover and disrupting their coordinated advance. Viper 2, your turn. I'll mark targets with smoke rockets. Torres rolled into his attack run with aggressive precision, his aircraft diving toward enemy positions with the confidence of a pilot who'd done this hundreds of times before. His cannon fire walked across enemy vehicles and personnel, creating chaos in their carefully planned assault. But as Torres pulled up from his attack, Elena saw surface-to-air missiles launching from concealed positions near the enemy formation. Chun's electronic warfare systems had detected the radar signatures, but the missiles were already in flight. Viper 2, SAM's in the air. Break left and deploy countermeasures. Torres responded immediately, throwing his aircraft into evasive maneuvers while dispensing chaff and flares to confuse the incoming missiles. Elena watched in tense silence as the weapons tracked toward her teammates' aircraft, their proximity. Fuses armed and ready to detonate. The first missile detonated close enough to pepper Torres's aircraft with shrapnel, but the A-10's legendary armor protection saved his life. The second missile passed harmlessly through his chaff cloud, its guidance system confused by the electronic countermeasures. Viper 2 is hit but flyable, Torres reported, his voice tight with adrenaline. Minor damage to port wing, all systems functional. Elena felt rage building in her chest. The enemy had managed to draw them into a trap using concealed SAM sights to threaten her aircraft while maintaining their assault on the base. But rage was a tool that experienced combat pilots learned to harness rather than suppress. Viper 4, locate and suppress those SAM sites. 2 and 3, continue close air support for the base defenders. I'm going hunting. Elena climbed to altitude and began systematically analyzing the enemy positions, looking for the telltale signatures of surface-to-air missile systems. Her targeting pods scanned the terrain below while her electronic warfare systems monitored for radar emissions. There, hidden among a cluster of civilian buildings, the distinctive shape of a mobile SAM launcher. The enemy had positioned there air defenses in populated areas, knowing that American pilots would hesitate to engage targets near civilians. But Elena had faced this tactical dilemma before. During her deployments in the Middle East, the key was precision, using weapons that could eliminate the threat without causing collateral damage to nearby structures. Viper lead engaging SAM. Sight with precision munitions. Danger close to civilian structures. She selected a small diameter bomb from her weapons load, a weapon designed for exactly this kind of target. The guidance system locked onto the SAM launcher while avoiding nearby buildings, threading the needle between military necessity and humanitarian concern. The explosion was precisely contained, destroying the missile system while leaving surrounding structures intact. Elena immediately began searching for additional SAM sites, knowing that enemy air defenses typically operated in coordinated networks. Viper lead, this is Sentinel Control. Outstanding work on that SAM site. Enemy assault has stalled on the northern perimeter, but we're taking heavy pressure on the eastern approach. Request immediate close air support for troops in contact. Elena checked her tactical display and saw American positions being overrun by superior numbers of enemy infantry supported by armored vehicles. Without immediate intervention, the base's eastern defenses would collapse. Viper 3, take the lead on eastern sector support. I'll coordinate with ground controllers and mark targets. Mitchell's voice came through the radio with calm professionalism. Viper 3, engaging eastern sector. I see friendly positions marked with infrared strobes. Enemy forces approximately 50 meters east of friendly lines. Elena watched Mitchell execute a textbook close air support attack, his cannon fire precisely targeted to eliminate enemy threats without endangering American troops. His experience showed in every aspect of the engagement, from his approach, angle to his weapon selection, to his coordination with ground controllers. Excellent shooting, Viper 3. Enemy assault on Eastern Sector has been repelled. But even as they celebrated small victories, Elena could see that the overall situation remained critical. Enemy forces were regrouping for another assault, bringing forward additional armor and artillery. The battle was far from over, and her small flight of A-10s was all that stood between 300 American soldiers and overwhelming enemy numbers. Viper flight, this is lead, fuel and ammunition check. The responses were sobering. All 4 aircraft had expended significant amounts of fuel and weapons during the initial engagement. They could continue fighting for perhaps another hour before being forced to return to base for refueling and rearming. Viper lead, this is Sentinel Control. We're tracking enemy reinforcements approaching from the south. Estimate battalion strength with heavy armor support. ETA, approximately 30 minutes. Elena felt her stomach drop. A battalion of enemy troops with armor support would overwhelm the base defenders even with close air support. Unless reinforcements arrived soon, they were facing a no-win situation. Sentinel Control, what's the status on friendly reinforcements? Negative on reinforcements, Viper lead. You're all we've got for the next 8 hours minimum. Elena realized that this was the moment that defined combat pilots. Not the routine missions or training exercises, but the desperate situations, where impossible odds demanded extraordinary measures. She could retreat and preserve her aircraft and crew, or she could commit everything to protecting the soldiers counting on her support. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Viper flight. This is lead. We're staying until the job is done. Redistribute ammunition between aircraft. Prioritize targets that threaten base integrity. We hold the line until reinforcements arrive. Copy that, lead, came Torres's immediate response. Viper 2 is with you. Viper 3 committed. Mitchell added, let's show these bastards what A-10s can do. Chun's voice carried quiet determination. Viper 4 is locked and loaded. Electronic warfare systems are optimized for extended engagement. Elena felt pride swelling in her chest. These were warriors in the truest sense, professionals who understood that their mission transcended personal safety. They would hold the line because that's what close air support pilots did. The next 4 hours tested every skill Elena had developed during her military career. Wave after wave of enemy assaults broke against the combined firepower of her flight and the base defenders. She coordinated airstrikes with ground controllers, managed fuel and ammunition conservation, and made split-second tactical decisions that meant the difference between life and death for soldiers she'd never met. Torres's aircraft took additional damage from small arms fire, but the A-10's legendary durability kept him in the fight. Mitchell's precise shooting eliminated enemy commanders and disrupted coordinated attacks. Chun's electronic warfare systems jammed enemy communications and defeated additional SAM systems that threatened their operations. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Elena could see that they were reaching the limits of their endurance. Fuel gauges showed critical levels, ammunition counters displayed single digits, and her pilots were showing signs of combat fatigue that could lead to fatal mistakes. Viper lead, this is Sentinel Control. We have friendly air assets inbound, ETA 10 minutes. Can you hold position until they arrive? Elena checked her fuel gauge one more time. 10 minutes would require flying on fumes, but it was doable if nothing else went wrong. Affirmative, Sentinel Control. Viper flight will maintain position for 10 more minutes. But as she spoke, her radar warning receiver began screaming alerts. Enemy aircraft were approaching from the north, fast movers that could only be fighter jets acquired through the same black market channels that had provided the ground forces equipment. Viper flight, we have enemy fighters inbound. 4 aircraft. Probably older model F-16s. They'll be here in 5 minutes. Elena felt the tactical situation crystallize in her mind. 4 A-10s, low on fuel and ammunition, against 4 enemy fighters in air-to-air combat. The A-10 was not designed for dogfighting, but it was designed to absorb punishment and keep flying. Viper flight, maintain close air support for the base. I'll engage the fighters. Negative lead, Torres responded immediately. We stay together. 4 against 4, and we've got better pilots. Elena realized he was right. Their only chance was to use their experience and teamwork to overcome the enemy's advantages in speed and maneuverability. Viper flight, defensive circle formation. Use the base's air defenses for cover, and remember that A-10s can take more punishment than those F-16s can dish out. The air-to-air engagement that followed was unlike anything Elena had experienced during her military career. A-10s trading missiles and cannon fire with enemy fighters over a battlefield were American. Soldiers were counting on their support. She watched Torres use his aircraft's durability to absorb missile damage while returning fire with his cannon. Mitchell demonstrated why experience mattered more than aircraft performance, outmaneuvering younger pilots through superior tactical positioning. Chun proved that electronic warfare could be decisive even in air combat, jamming enemy radar systems and disrupting their coordination at critical moments. Elena found herself in a head-to-head engagement with the enemy flight leader, an experienced pilot who understood A-10 capabilities and was trying to exploit their limitations. But as they maneuvered for position, Elena remembered why she'd been considered exceptional during her military career. She understood her aircraft's strengths and weaknesses better than any manual could teach. The enemy fighter came at her from above, trying to use speed and altitude for a decisive advantage. But Elena had anticipated the attack, positioning herself where the enemy would be forced to fly through the base's defensive fire to maintain his assault. The pilot was good, but he made the mistake of fixating on his target while ignoring the broader tactical situation. Base defenders opened fire with everything they had as the enemy fighter dove toward Elena's position. The pilot was forced to break off his attack to avoid the intense ground fire, giving Elena the opening she needed. Her cannon fire found the enemy aircraft's engine intake, sending the fighter tumbling toward the ground in a cloud of smoke and debris. Splash 1 enemy fighter, she reported, already scanning for additional threats. Around her, the rest of Viper flight was achieving similar results. Torres had damaged another enemy fighter badly enough to force its withdrawal. Mitchell had shot down a 3rd aircraft with precision cannon fire. Chun had used electronic warfare to cause the 4th enemy fighter to suffer a navigation failure that sent it fleeing toward friendlier airspace. Viper flight, this is Rampart leader. We're 4 F-22s inbound to relieve you on station. Outstanding work out there. Elena felt relief flooding through her as she saw the distinctive shapes of Raptor fighters approaching from the south. Air Force reinforcements had finally arrived, bringing sufficient firepower to secure the base and pursue retreating enemy forces. Rampart leader, this is Viper lead. Base is secure. Enemy forces are retreating. We're critically low on fuel and need immediate recovery to friendly airfield. Copy that, Viper lead. You're cleared to return to base. We'll take it from here. As Elena led her flight away from the battlefield, she looked back at forward operating base Sentinel. Smoke rose from destroyed enemy vehicles, but the American flag still flew over the compound. 300 soldiers would return home safely because 4 A-10 pilots had chosen to stay and fight against impossible odds. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in the briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base, facing the same group of senior officers who'd recruited her 3 months earlier. The emergency response program was being formally concluded, its mission accomplished through the efforts of pilots like her teammates, who'd proven that experience and determination could overcome numerical disadvantages. Captain Vasquez, General. Harrison began, using her newly restored rank. The success of the emergency response program exceeded all expectations. 4 pilots, 6 aircraft, and a 100% mission success rate over 3 months of operations. Elena felt pride at the recognition, but also a deep satisfaction that came from knowing she'd served her country effectively when it mattered most. The quiet waitress from Cedar Falls was gone forever, replaced by someone who'd rediscovered her true calling. The question now, Harrison continued, is what comes next. The Air Force would like to offer you a permanent position leading the A-10 modernization program. The pay is excellent, the responsibility is significant, and the mission is critical to maintaining our close air support capabilities. Elena considered the offer carefully. A permanent return to military service, with all the benefits and burdens that entailed. No more hiding, no more anonymity, but also no more uncertainty about her purpose and identity. With respect, General, I appreciate the offer, but I think my skills might be better utilized in a different capacity. Harrison raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Training. The emergency response program proved that experienced pilots can make critical differences in desperate situations. But we need more experienced pilots, and we need them to understand modern systems and tactics. Elena paused, organizing her thoughts. I'd like to establish a training program for A-10 pilots transitioning to civilian status, keeping them current and available for emergency recall. A reserve force of experienced aviators who can respond to crises like Riverside. Richardson, who'd been silent during the meeting, smiled broadly. Elena, that's an excellent idea. We've learned that relying entirely on active duty forces leaves us vulnerable to exactly the kind of attack that started this whole crisis. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. A civilian reserve training program with you as the director. Government contract position, significant autonomy, and the authority to recruit and train the pilots you think we need. Yes, sir. And I know exactly where I'd like to base the program. 3 months later, Elena stood in front of Murphy's diner in Cedar Falls, Nevada, watching construction crews convert the adjacent building into a flight training facility. The small desert town was about to become home to the most advanced close air support training program in the world, bringing together experienced pilots from across the country for intensive courses in modern tactics and systems. Sam Murphy approached from the diner, carrying 2 cups of coffee and shaking his head in amazement. Elena, I have to admit, when you left here claiming family emergency, I never imagined it would lead to this. Elena accepted the coffee gratefully. Sometimes family emergencies turn into new opportunities. So you're really staying this time? Building something permanent here? Elena looked up at the vast Nevada sky, where A-10 aircraft were already conducting training flights in preparation for the program's official opening. I think I've found where I belong, Sam. It just took me a while to remember who I really was. Martha jogged over from the diner, her expression mixing excitement with lingering bewilderment. Elena, I just heard on the radio that you're some kind of military hero. Is it true that you saved 300 soldiers in combat? Elena smiled, remembering her old life as a waitress when the most important decision was whether someone wanted cream in their coffee. I did my job, Martha. Same as I always have. But now your job involves flying fighter jets and training other pilots. That's a bit of a career change from waiting tables. Elena laughed, feeling more content than she had in years. Not as much of a change as you might think. Both jobs are about serving others, keeping people safe, and making sure everyone gets what they need. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the desert, Elena watched her first class of reserve pilots preparing for their initial training flight. Former military aviators who'd answered the call to serve again. Civilians with military backgrounds who wanted to contribute to national defense. Active duty pilots cross-training on A-10 systems. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Torres, now serving as her deputy director of training. New emergency taskings coming in from Pentagon. Looks like our little program is about to get very busy. Elena typed back quickly. Good. We're ready for whatever comes next. She'd spent 9 years hiding from who she really was, serving coffee instead of serving her country, letting fear of political consequences override her sense of duty and purpose. The attack on Riverside had forced her to choose between safety and service, between anonymity and action. The choice had led her back to the cockpit, back to combat, and ultimately back to a life that made sense. She was Elena Vasquez, call sign Viper, and she was exactly where she belonged. The warrior had come home, and the sky was calling once again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.